Have you ever walked down a crowded sidewalk, or maybe through a busy office hallway, and suddenly tripped over your own feet? It wasn't a major fall, just a clumsy, awkward stumble, but in that split second, your heart rate spikes. You immediately stiffen up, check your clothes, and cast a frantic glance around to see who witnessed your moment of weakness. You feel as if every eye on the street is suddenly laser-focused on you. You can feel the heat rising in your face, imagining the strangers behind you smirking or whispering about how uncoordinated you are. The rest of your day might be haunted by the ghost of that moment. You replay it in your head, cursing yourself for a tiny accident that was in reality completely insignificant. This is a phenomenon experienced by almost every human being with a social conscience. We live on an imaginary stage where we are convinced that the spotlight is always on, pointed directly at our faces. Every coffee stain on our shirt, every stutter during a presentation, every hair that is out of place, we treat these as breaking news for everyone around us. But there is a harsh, yet liberating truth we need to discuss today. The truth is, nobody cares. Welcome to the psychological reality known as the spotlight effect. It is a mental condition where we tend to overestimate the extent to which others notice our appearance, our behaviors, and our mistakes. We feel as if the center of our own social universe, so we naturally assume that others are viewing us with the same intensity that we view ourselves. The problem is, this assumption is almost always wrong. Let's go back to the late 1990s at Cornell University. A psychologist named Thomas Gilovich wanted to prove just how bad we are at estimating the attention of others. He asked a student to wear a shirt that was incredibly loud and at the time considered socially embarrassing, a t-shirt featuring the face of singer Barry Manilow. The student was mortified. He had to walk into a room full of strangers wearing this fashion disaster on his chest. Gilovich then asked the student, "How many people in this room do you think noticed the shirt?" With total confidence, the student estimated that at least 50% of the people in the room must have clocked his embarrassing outfit. However, when Gilovich actually surveyed the people in the room, the results were staggering. Only about 25% of the people had even noticed what was on the student's shirt. Most people were too busy with their own thoughts, too caught up in their own conversations, or perhaps wondering what they were going to have for lunch to notice that a stranger was wearing a Barry Manilow shirt right in front of them. The gap between that imagined 50% and the actual 25% is what we call the spotlight effect. We see the world through an egocentric lens. This doesn't mean we are narcissists, it's just the way our brains are wired. We spend 24 hours a day with ourselves. We feel every emotion, we hear every internal thought, and we are aware of every inch of our own bodies. Because we are so hyper-aware of ourselves, we automatically think others share that same level of awareness.
In reality, the contrast is sharp. Imagine every person you pass on the street is the lead actor in their own movie. They have their own conflicts, their own anxieties, and they are standing under their own imaginary spotlights. They are far too busy making sure their own spotlight doesn't burn out to spend any extra energy illuminating yours. Think about the last time you saw someone at the grocery store accidentally drop a jar of pickles. Are you still thinking about it right now? Did you form a deep, lasting negative judgment of their character just because they dropped a jar? Probably not. You likely noticed it for 2 seconds, maybe felt a brief flash of sympathy, and then went right back to checking your grocery list. But for the person who dropped the jar, that moment might have ruined their entire afternoon. This perception gap creates an invisible prison for many of us. We limit ourselves because we are terrified of the judgment of others. We hold back from asking a question in a meeting because we don't want to look stupid. We don't wear the clothes we actually like because we're afraid they look weird. We don't start that new hobby or post our creative work online because the ghost of the spotlight is always whispering that everyone will laugh when we fail. So how do we turn this spotlight off? The first step is understanding social diffusion of responsibility. Not only do people rarely notice our mistakes, but even when they do, they tend to forget them almost instantly. Human memory is incredibly limited. Why would a stranger store memory of your social stumble when they can barely remember where they parked their car this morning? The second step is learning to laugh at yourself. If we are the first ones to notice and acknowledge our mistakes with a smile, the spotlight loses its power. When you stumble and laugh, you send a signal to the world that it's not a big deal. And when you treat it like it's not a big deal, everyone else follows suit. Your reaction dictates their perception. Furthermore, try to turn your attention outward. Often, the best way to stop feeling watched is to start watching. Notice how many people around you make small mistakes every day, and notice how little you think of them afterward. By realizing how quickly you forget the blunders of others, you will begin to understand how quickly they forget yours. Remember the student with the Barry Manilow shirt. The world didn't end when he wore that shirt. Nobody hated him. Nobody remembered him forever as the kid with the bad taste. He was just background noise in the lives of others. And that's the reality of all of us. We are all just flecks of dust in a massive social galaxy. So, the next time you feel that familiar spike of anxiety before you step onto a stage, or when you feel embarrassed for a typo in a group chat, take a deep breath. Remind yourself that everyone there is thinking about their own stains, their own bills, or that awkward thing they said 3 years ago. They simply don't have the bandwidth to judge you. The spotlight was never actually there. It was just a projection of our internal craving for validation and our fear of rejection. When you find the courage to flip the switch and turn that spotlight off, you'll realize that the darkness you feared is actually a vast, open space of possibility. You can be whoever you want, do whatever you want, and take risks without the weight of the world on your shoulders. Live as if no one is watching, not because there are no people around, but because they are all busy being the protagonists of their own stages. Give yourself permission to be imperfect. Give yourself permission to stumble. Because in the end, the most important story isn't what others thought of you. It's what you were brave enough to do when you realized their opinions didn't actually matter. I'm the thinker for Thinko. Let's keep questioning, let's keep reflecting, and most importantly, let's start seeing the world as it is, not as our anxiety paints it to be. Turn off the spotlight and start living. Thank you for listening this far. I'll see you in the next thought.